You are listening to the Sarah Fader podcast. This is what anxiety feels like. And I am here with a very special guest, Michelle Tillis Lederman. Rhymes with David Letterman. Well, not rhymes, but it is like David Letterman. But
My
welcome.
father-in-law's name is David, but it does not help us get reservations.
Oh, no. Well, that's just too bad. Michelle is the author of The Seven Laws of Likability and The Connector Advantage. Well, welcome.
Thanks for having me. It's actually, we have 11 laws of likability. There's even more than seven, but we have the seven mindsets of a connector.
Why did I say seven? I looked at it and I looked at the number 11 and said seven. You know what? Maybe it's like 7, 11, the lucky numbers, you know?
Well, one book has 11 and the other book has seven, so I get it.
So let's try that again. The 11 laws of likability. And actually, it's funny that I messed that up because I was just looking at the 11 laws of likability today. And one of the ones that resonated with me was this authenticity, right? So being your authentic self, which I think we could all embrace, especially those of us that have anxiety or any kind of neurodiversity. So, what would you say to someone who is hesitant to be their authentic self in their work life who has anxiety?
It's so interesting. I'm a parent of kids with anxiety. So, I listen to this and I'm thinking like, okay, I got to think about how I would think about this with my kids. Um, you know, and and generally I always say the real you is the best you. And at the same time, we all need to continue to stretch ourselves and help build new muscles so we can be a stronger you, a happier you, a whatever fill in the blank you want to be. And so authenticity doesn't mean like, well, I'm a jerk, I get to be a jerk. And I've had a lot of people say, oh, the real you is that's me, I'm just a jerk. What I really want people to think about is understanding, um, you know, what they're feeling good about in themselves and infusing those qualities that they feel good about in the things that they do, because that feels real and authentic and that's who they are. And at the same time, we all have what I call unique charms. And unique charms is actually out of the connector's advantage. The idea of being open and accepting is not just about being open and accepting to everybody else out there. It's about being open and accepting of ourselves and understanding that a unique charm, let me just define that, is a quality about ourselves that is core to our authenticity, who we are, but it's a quality that might not always work for us. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And I'm happy to share mine and my husband's unique charms with you if you want some examples.
Oh, I can't wait to hear those. I was just thinking, though, I've heard that narrative so much about, well, this is just the way that I am. I am an asshole, right? Like, I feel like that's an excuse to be mean sometimes. Or when people say, I just tell it like it is. Yeah, but if you tell it like it is and it's not constructive or it's not adding value, is that really, you're being authentic, but it's not adding to the conversation? What would you say to someone who says, well, that's just the way I am, I just tell it like it is?
So you can be however you want to be, but you need to understand the impact that you have on other people. And if you want to be a connector and you want to put relationships first, you need to think about the dynamic with somebody else. You don't live authenticity in a vacuum, right? You don't exist only with how you see the world. It is really the exchange, or I call it sometimes the dance, that you're in with somebody else. And so if that's the reaction you want to get, if that's the relationship you want to build with somebody, then you're going to see that kind of result, and you're not going to get the connector's advantage of faster, easier, better results. So if you think about wanting to be real with somebody, think about how they can receive that information. I see my ring light in my glasses, so I'm going to take them off so you guys don't have the reflection behind the curtain, right?
Right,
Uh,
exactly. Yes, and I told Michelle this, but your hair just looks fabulous. Tell us what you use in your hair. We need to know.
Lots of curly girl products. I got the Not Your Mother's, the Deva Curl stuff, a little L'Oreal. I got so many products. It's crazy.
Not your mothers, if you're listening to this, please sponsor my podcast. I love them so much. I think their curly cream is the best.
I don't know if I've used that one, but I like their gel and their mousse and their spray.
All of it. Yes. So again, not your mothers, please sponsor. We need you. So tell us what the 11 laws of likability are.
Okay, so it's broken into three parts: what to do before, during, and after a conversation to enable connection to form. And authenticity is really, it's chapter one. It's the thread, it's foundation. Through everything else that you think about, you have to have that lens of authenticity. And again, that doesn't mean we don't stretch and try to flex. Flex being a momentary, temporary adjustment, right, to enable that interaction with somebody else.
Mhm.
Then the before the conversation includes the law of self-image, law of perception, and the law of energy. So that's kind of understanding how I see myself and how others see me, opposite side of the same coin, and then what energy I'm bringing into the interactions.
Right.
Then we have the conversation. And the conversation, I always say when people don't know where to start a conversation, start by being curious. So the law of curiosity. And then, of course, if you're going to ask a question, you got to listen to the answer. So the law of listening. And then what we look for is the fact that we don't connect on what we do for a living, but we connect on what we like to do in our lives, on common causes, interests, values, experiences, people, places, passions. All of those things are really what forms the connection. So what we're looking for in that conversation is finding that commonality, and that's the law of similarity. And we end our conversation with considering the law of mood memory, the idea that people remember more how you make them feel than anything that you've said. So that's the middle section of the book. And then it's, okay, you had the conversation. Now what? What do you do after the conversation to extend that relationship beyond one interaction? And that's when we talk about the law of familiarity, to stay in somebody's mind, but not in their face.
Well, yes, I definitely relate to that. Yes, continue.
And then for me, when people say, what's the most important law? I always say, well, there's two. One is the authenticity, and the other is chapter 10, which is the law of giving, which I actually originally titled the law of reciprocity. And it just wasn't sitting right with me, because it wasn't about the reciprocity of the relationship. It was about giving because you can and because you want to, and giving without expectation and adding value to that relationship. And that's a really powerful way to extend it and to, it may result in reciprocity. It may not. It may result in them paying it forward. And that's where we get into the final chapter, which is the law of patience, and understanding that your results and your relationships need time.
That makes so much sense. It's funny because I tend to be a very giving person, and it freaks people out because they think, "Well, what do I have to give back?" But I don't think like that at all.
So I actually did talk once, and I'll never forget. And I'm talking about giving, and I'm saying give because you can. And somebody in the front row, she was loud. I mean, and she just let it out. She's like, "I'm tired of giving. Where's mine?" And I was like, you're on a stage, and you have this moment. And I looked at her and I thought, like, well, maybe she's doing this wrong. Maybe she's doing... And then I stopped, because I went in my head, like really quickly trying to figure out, why is this happening to her? And I said, well, what have you asked for? Or have you asked for anything? And she said, no. And I said, I said, there's the challenge. We have to be willing to ask. And it's really hard for givers, right, to sometimes put themselves in the position of ask. But if you think about being a giver and realizing how good it feels to add value, to feel valued, and to feel valuable for somebody else, think about how somebody else can feel when they can do that for you. And to receive is also a gift. And, my latest book, The Connector's Advantage, actually follows 11 laws of likability. And these are some of the things that I build on with those concepts. And one of the minds as a connector, and I don't want to confuse the audience, but it is a learning path, is having a clear vision, knowing what you want and being willing to ask for it.
Yeah, it's what I loved is in the introduction when you talk about that moment when you're teaching at NYU and the student says, "What, you just want us to like you." And then your immediate reaction was, "No, that's not what I don't care if you like me or not." But then you have this moment of self-reflection and you think, "Actually, that's true." And I think it's human to want to be liked.
Yeah. I still kind of squirm a little bit at that story, because I still remember it. It's still so vivid for me. I can still see this boy's face. And especially when the sparkle went out of his eyes, when I'm like, no, I don't care. Because of course it's good to care. that means that you are thinking about the importance of relationships and your impact on other people. And there's so many, I have a talk called Boost Your Likability, Boost Your Influence, or Boost Your Likability, Boost Your Business, because, there's likability and respect, and, all these headlines in the newspapers about what's good about likability and what's not good. I actually lost a client because of the word likability.
Really? Why
Well,
did
it
that
never
happen?
became a client.
Yeah.
It was a large financial firm. Somebody who was part of the firm was in my audience. She's like, "Oh my God, you're amazing. You need to speak to our women's group." And I'm like, "I would love to speak to your women's group," all the way through the process. And then they changed leadership. And the new one said, "Likability, no thanks."
Why?
They thought in a financial firm, women shouldn't focus on being liked. And I never worked with them. And that's okay. But you can see that we have these very visceral, very strong reaction to likability. And people always like, "Well, do you think it's more important to be liked or respected?" And I'm like, those two things are not mutually exclusive.
Absolutely not. I think it becomes an issue when you become hyper focused on being liked, because when I remember when I was teaching in New York, and I would get fixated on whether or not the fellow teachers liked me, and it would be impeding my ability to be successful at work. That's when I think it becomes sort of an issue. So I think there's a balance between being respectful and curious and listening and doing all of those things that you talked about that are glorious. I love them. But also, you need to balance the fact that it's okay if somebody does not like me. You've done everything you can. You've done all the things to be empathetic, to be a good listener. And then if they don't like you, there's really not much you can do.
Thank you so much for highlighting that, because um, when I first put the book out and I had a few offers from publishers, one of the publishers wanted to change the name of the book to 50 Ways to Make People Like You. And I'm like, you can't make somebody like you. And they offered me more money than the publisher I ended up going with, but that's not the book I was writing. And I want to be really clear and emphasize what you just shared is you cannot make anybody like you. But we are all likable individuals. What one person's going to like about me is different than somebody else. So what you want to think about is how to enable somebody to see what is likable and to find what is likable about you. Because it's going to be with, again, in that exchange. So the hyper focus really resonated with me. I also used to be a professor at NYU and teach in New York. And I also, teach a lot of, adult education courses in corporations and things like that. And I remember being with a public workshop and feeling like there was these two women that were like, and I just didn't have them, right? They just, I knew I didn't have them. And I was hyper focusing on trying to get them in
Yeah.
when I had everyone else in the room but those two. And one of the things I had to learn and to build, I guess, a thicker skin around is understanding you can't get them all.
You can't. It's
You
true.
can't get them all.
It's true. And I think it can be painful, especially with people that are neurodivergent, because for me, having ADHD and feeling the sort of weight of society's rejection over and over again, it becomes this layered feeling of, do they not like me because of my disability? Is it something that I can change, or is it something that is inherent in me? And I think you can go down a rabbit hole. And so I think the best way to handle that, and you can give me your input, but the way that I look at it is, you can try the laws of likability, do everything you can, and then realize that it's not personal, right? So if someone does not like you, maybe that's just not a connection worth fostering, and you'll find somebody else who will appreciate the parts of you that you're sharing.
Yes, and right. So, yes to everything you said. And sometimes whether or not they like you is all in your head.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Right. You project your fear, your anxiety, your whatever it is you're feeling, your insecurity on a look, a glance. And I remember doing this, and I think I tell the story in this book as well. And I don't remember what I named her because I remember her real name, but I changed the names in the book. But it was a girl I went to business school with, and she was tall and thin and a former model and born with a silver spoon in her mouth and gorgeous. And like, she never talked to me. And I, of course, then I started not liking her because I assumed she didn't like me, because we don't like people who don't like us.
Right,
Right.
exactly.
And and then I planned a spring break trip for our cluster, and she was the first one to hand me a check. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I have to go on vacation with this girl. Not only that, we
Boy,
ended up
gewalt.
right. And not only that, we ended up in a room together.
No.
And what I learned was this gorgeous, rich, tall, beautiful, smart human was incredibly shy.
Interesting. And you would never have thought that because you internalized it as something you were doing or not doing.
I literally thought she looked down her nose at me because I'm 4'10" and she's like, 5'10". So
You're
she
sitting, yeah.
was
It's funny because you're sitting down, so I had no idea that you were 4'10". You
four
have
foot
such
10.
a big personality.
Thank you. I take that as a compliment.
It is
And
a huge compliment. No, it's really funny. I'm also short, so I'm like, yes, short ladies unite.
we're above average at being small.
Yeah, we are. We know what's going on. Small but mighty. Yeah, that is so interesting. And I actually think back to high school. I went to performing arts high school. So there was a lot of pressure to perform. And being anxious was difficult for me, and having panic attacks and all that fun mental illness stuff that I had to deal with in the 90s when we had to hide things. So it was hard because I don't know because I can't read minds, but I would think that some people might have that opinion of me, like, oh, she's so off, in her own world, or maybe she's a bitch or whatever this is, because I was, dealing with a lot of things. You don't know what people are dealing with, and you don't know whether it's that they don't like you or they're just dealing with some heavy shit that they can't
Yeah.
talk about.
And so we can't control somebody else's interpretation. I also remember I was teaching a class, and it turns out somebody in my class knew somebody in my town. And I said something like, oh, how do you know Monet? And she told me later, she heard it as, how do you know Monet?
Wow.
And she realized that it was her and not the way I said it. But I
Hmm.
had no idea she interpreted me in that moment. And I was getting resting bitch face for like
Right.
the first half of the day because she was so turned off.
By your delivery. So how did she bring it up to you that you said it that way?
Well, when I was teaching a course on the laws of likability, and we were talking about how we are perceived and facial expressions. And she said, hey, everyone always tells me I have resting bitch face. And then she came and she was just like really vulnerable and open and said, I realize that I know you said it this way and I heard it this way.
Wow.
And so, that self-reflection of recognizing, and it's actually something I talk about in this book a little bit, is understanding, how to slow your thinking down and to stay in a place of curiosity versus conclusion. And so one of the mindsets of a connector is to be curious, but to understand that we take in information really quickly and we form our opinions, and then we seek to prove ourselves right, which is confirmation bias. And if we want to stay open to being wrong, right? So this is also part of being open and accepting. We need to be open to being wrong, to checking our assumptions, to slowing our thinking down. And she was able to do that. And that's really
Yeah,
powerful.
that's very powerful. It's not easy to do. I think there's also a balance too, because I think about people with anxiety, and I think like myself, and or OCD or anything where you sort of second guess yourself. And there's this tendency to kind of go overboard with that feeling of feeling like, oh no, I did something so wrong, right? And then get self critical rather than reflective, right? So I think it's about stopping yourself before you get to the point of self criticism and saying, okay, this actually went in a direction that I wasn't I didn't plan on. And let's see how can I do differently next time? Not better, because I feel like that's a judgment. How can I react in a different way? Or how can I react in a more productive way, or whatever it is? Because I think when you say the word better, I feel like it's very loaded, right? Like it's judgmental. So I feel like it's good to be able to say, I don't like the way this turned out. How can we modify it?
How can I interpret this differently?
Oh,
What
I
would
love that.
be right? So now we're coming back to this book. I say they really do play off of each
Oh
other.
yeah, actually, so sorry. Let me just interrupt you. So I do want to talk about the connector's advantage. Tell us about the connector's advantage.
So it really does build. I actually summarize the laws of likability and the connector's advantage because it builds off of those concepts. And um, one of the things I wanted to finish the thought on
Yes.
likability, which was the law of self-image and
Okay,
understanding.
pause. I'm not going to criticize myself for interrupting you. I'm going to take this as a teachable moment. So yes, please finish your thought.
No, I love the energy and I love to follow the train of thought. I am a rabbit that will follow the squirrel anywhere you go. It is great. And hopefully we get to all of these things.
We will. We will do it. And you know what? There's always time for a part two. Yes. So
Perfect. I'll come back for
continue.
part two.
Let's
We
do
can
it.
do this book in part two.
Yes.
But your whole thing around that inner voice and the self-critic and even people always perceive me as really, really confident and things like that. And it doesn't matter. We all have our insecurities, no matter what we project out to the world. And so one of the things that I talk about is understanding what the messages that you're saying to yourself. And I give different techniques. And the one I wanted to share is called Be Your Own Best Friend.
Ooh, okay.
Because we are pretty nasty to ourselves. We are beating ourselves up. And if you had a friend that talked to you that way, you would not be friends. But
Nope.
think about a friend who would say the things you need to hear, who would be your cheerleader, who would help you recognize and talk you off the ledge and all of that stuff. And sometimes they're not there. And you need to be that voice for yourself. So I just really wanted to get that concept out there. Thank you for letting me revert back.
Yeah, and I think that that actually comes with a lot of self-reflection because a lot of times we get stuck with this really old sense of self, right? This old sense of, the trauma that we've experienced as children or like young people. I think we can get stuck as seeing ourselves as the mistakes we've made. And so it can help, I think, to change the narrative on that and say, what are the parts of myself that I do like? And how can I be the cheerleader for those parts, or even embracing the parts that we have to work on, like,
That's that unique charm thing,
right.
right?
And I do want to talk about that. I was just thinking because I'm doing some self-reflection now and I'm thinking I interrupted Michelle, but you know what? She reframed it as enthusiasm, right? So that's a unique charm. So tell us about unique charms.
So unique charms, as I said earlier, is the qualities about ourselves that are core to who we are, but they sometimes work for us and sometimes work against us. So I promise you, I'll give my husband's example first. People might like this one. I love my husband's sense of humor. He has made me laugh from the beginning, and almost 19 years, he still has me laughing. And I love this quality about him. It's who he is, dad jokes galore. And then there's times that he goes for the joke when he really shouldn't, or the joke is a little like, you know?
Yeah, like or when you're upset. Does
Yeah,
he
like,
does he joke when you're what does he try to make you laugh when you're sad?
um, like he always goes for the joke. It's just like his brain is just wired to find the joke. And then sometimes I'm just like, side eye, like,
No,
like,
or
no,
you're angry. You're like, I
I'm
don't
like,
think this is
I
the
don't want to
right
laugh right
time.
now.
No, exactly. No, thank you.
So that's one of his unique charms. I don't want him to change it, but he does need to understand when that charm is not charming. For me, I know that I can talk a lot. And just like you, I get enthusiastic and I interrupt and I get, and I can be a lot, right? And understanding that I can build some habits in, not to not be, I'm never going to be the quiet girl, but I can be the girl who talks second or third and not first.
Oh, I like that.
I
That is
can
awesome.
I've learned to make sure I take breaths even while I'm doing podcasts because like really I could just keep talking. I don't need to ask me questions. I'll just keep going. I'll follow tan, right? But I make sure I stop, breathe, and let you jump back in. And it's hard.
I love that. I love that though because that's something I'm going to take with me. I love first of all I love learning from you. I love learning from everybody, but I love learning from you. I feel so many similarities between us and I think it's the nice Jewish girl thing, for one, and the curly hair. But I love, yeah, your hair is amazing. I mean, your hair could get a podcast. I'm telling you. But I love that the I could be the girl that talks second or third. That's a great way to look at it because it's not this dire situation where I have to get it all out or I'm going to forget it or I need to impart this information because saying it second or third is still saying it.
Yeah. And it gives people room. And sometimes I'll think about things like, oh, am I oversharing? Right. So there's another one of my unique charms. I tend to be a little TMI. I blame my mother. She was always TMI, and I would like be mortified, and yet I think I do it.
I haven't heard any TMI here and I'm waiting for it and I love it. Bring it on. Let's talk about our periods. No.
Yeah. Don't get that anymore. So
Yes.
there's your
Oh,
TMI.
I'm so jealous. I can't wait to not have my period anymore. It's what's so funny. Okay, so side note, and I think you'll appreciate this because tangents. My mom, I asked her. This was like way back in the day. My mom, passed away in 2020. But I said, "What was menopause like?" And she's like, "You know what? I didn't even notice I was going through it because I'm always crazy." I was like, "Okay, well that's great. I hope that happens for me too."
I have a little portable fan on my desk for the hot flashes, I'll just say.
So how hot are they though? I mean, do you wake up with
You
night
feel
sweats?
like you are burning from the inside out.
No, absolutely fucking not. That sounds horrible. So
Yeah, yeah.
you,
I that is the only part of this process that is challenging for me. Like nothing else bothers me in the whole thing, but the hot flashes, I like can't think. I'm like, can't think. Yeah.
yes, exactly. I mean, it's sad that Bill Cosby is a horrible person, but I do remember the Cosby Show with Claire Huxtable putting her head in the freezer during menopause.
Oh my God. My friend did that once at a barbecue before I had ever experienced it. And I was like, kind of thought it was odd. And then I'm like, oh, look, you're really sweating. She's like, yeah, I'm really sweating.
That's actually happening. Does anything help with them? Like, I mean, other than like fans?
Not that I have experienced.
Oh, Doom is
uh,
warning us. We're running out of time.
I'm still searching for the cool sheets. If anybody has really great cool sheets, I have bought so many pairs of sheets, and no, I'm yeah.
So I've heard that and also experienced that bamboo sheets are very cooling.
Okay.
Give them a shot.
So look at us. We took our tangent. We did TMI. This is not what your eyes is like.
I think people are very entertained,
Okay.
but also menopause and likability. Yeah, so we definitely should come back for the connector's advantage because I don't want to I don't want to squeeze it in so quickly that people don't get the full effect. But where can we find you? Where can we find you online?
The best place to start is really just my website, which is Michelle with two L's, Tillis, Tillis, Lederman, Lederman.com. And from there, you can get to my YouTube channel. You can get to my LinkedIn. I have a LinkedIn newsletter. We'll put all of this in the show notes. I give lots of free gifts away. So you'll get the gift pack link. You know, lots of ways to stay in touch with me. And I love to hear from the listeners.
I want free gifts. I'm going on the link.
Awesome.
Thank you so, so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on. It was so much fun.